Coming to you from the Deep South, this is the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. High-impact leadership is not reserved for leaders, and it has nothing to do with your position, title, or rank. However, it does have everything to do with your character. It's time to climb to the next level and beyond, personally and professionally. Now, let's start making it happen with your host, Mack Story.
Hello, and thanks for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast today. So today I want to start off today's talk focused on intention. Because intention is the foundation of trust. So it comes down to, why do we influence others? That's our intention. If you want to build trust, you want to have a high degree of influence, it's all going to be based on a foundation of intention, or either you're not going to be able to build trust because of the wrong intention. So you got to have the right intention to build trust, or the wrong intention is going to create distrust. And you can choose why you're doing what you're doing, but other people are going to decide what your intention is, just like you do. Someone may try to influence you for some reason. Their intent may be good, but if you think it's bad, you're going to take it as it's bad. Your perception is going to be your reality, without a doubt. That's the way it works for everyone. I'll start off here with a quote from Malcolm Gladwell. He says, "The key to good decision making is not knowledge, it is understanding." So as I talk to you today about your intention, the why behind your influence, my whole goal is to help you understand that's where it all starts. Relating to Malcolm Gladwell's quote, the key to good decision making is not knowledge, it is understanding. I know without a doubt your life will be better with more influence, not less. If you're a formal authority leader, you're going to have a whole lot less frustration in the organization, within the organization, if you've got a lot more influence and not less. Especially when it comes down to being a leader, a high impact leader, your intention is going to launch you or limit you. That's why a lot of leaders who don't study leadership, they got their intentions all wrong. They think it's about them. They're the boss. That's why they wanted the position. Many people who don't lead well, they don't even care. They just want the position and the title and the authority and the control. That's what they care about. It's why a lot of people say, why would they do this? Because they don't care about you. That's why they would do this, whatever this may be in a certain situation at work. So today's episode, moving into more in-depth, talking about influence, the things that lead to your influence. And again, I'm basing a lot of this content into coming episodes and the past few episodes from my book, Defining Influence. Increasing your influence increases your options. Hope you consider going to get that book. It's about 250 pages. It's not one of my smaller 90-page books with 30 chapters. It's different layout, as I've shared with you recently. But why do you want to influence others? Especially if you are a formal authority leader, you got to answer that question. And don't lie to yourself. If the reason you want to influence others is to control them and be the boss, you need to know that. You also need to know how much influence you're going to lose, how much integrity you're going to lose, how much negative word of mouth advertisement you're going to gain. You can be however you want to be as a leader, at work or at home. Remember, leadership happens at home just as much as it happens at work. It happens with your spouse, your children, whoever may live in your home. You need to know, why do you want to influence others? Because those you are trying to influence, this is what they want to know. What is your intent? What is your motive? What is your agenda? In other words, what thoughts are behind your behavior? I know when I was coming up through the ranks, especially early on in my career, but the whole time I worked in an organization, which was the first 20 years of my career, when I was an employee inside of a company. That's what I wanted to know about my boss. What thoughts were behind their behavior? And most of the time there was no communication. There was zero leadership development of us or any of our leaders. They were not getting it and they were not giving it. So lack of communication was a big thing. So we never really knew what their thoughts were because they were not communicating with us. We didn't know by their words. What we knew is what everybody knows, by their actions. You know, what was the thoughts behind their behavior? For most of them, it was all about them. It was all about controlling us. It was all about getting us to do what they wanted us to do. There really was no relationship. Not a leader-follower relationship. There was a boss-worker relationship. They were not being developed. We were not being developed. So there was a lot of frustration, irritation, lots of irritation. A lot of people irritated on both sides, the bosses and the workers. Us against them. But our character determines why we influence. I didn't have that language back then. I didn't think about character. I wasn't thinking about the character of the boss. They probably wasn't thinking about my character. Not in those words. But that's exactly what we were both thinking about. We just didn't have the words, the understanding to talk about it in a meaningful way. But our character determines why we influence. Who we are on the inside determines much of what happens on the outside. Think about that. Think about your life today. Good or bad, or a mixture of both. Who you are on the inside determines most, if not all, of what's happening on the outside. That's a hard pill for some people to swallow. They want to blame someone else. But until you realize you're getting the results you're supposed to be getting, and you take responsibility, the likelihood of you doing something to get better results are pretty low. Before I discovered all this stuff and I thought the whole world was screwed up and I was just perfect. I didn't say that literally, but I lived that way. I was always blaming everyone else and defending myself, which means I thought everyone else was wrong and I was right. Eventually, though, I figured out I was the problem. I started working on me. My life started getting better. Who are you? Who are you? Really? I can't see you. I don't know who you are that I'm talking to, but I know you're listening. Who are you on the inside? Not who everybody thinks you are, not who you want everybody to think you are. Who are you on the inside? What does your behavior communicate to the world? You see, who we think we are is important. Who we say we are is more important. But who we really are is most important. Think about that. Who we think we are is important. That's happening inside of our own mind. But that's driving a lot of our behavior, emotions, all that sort of stuff. Who we say we are is more important because that's who we're communicating to other people. Who we say we are. Now we get to live up to that. We get to be honest or dishonest about who we say we are. But who we really are is most important. And the reason it's most important because that's what's truly communicating to the world who we are. Why do we do the things we do? Why do we say the things we say? Who we are is revealed to others by our thoughts, choices. And the key point related to today's episode is, and the intent or the why behind them all. What's the intent behind what we do? What's the intent behind what we say? What's the intent behind how we say it? What's your intention? Maybe that's part of your problem. Because, see, you got the same problem I got. My problem is me. It's in the mirror. Your problem is you. It's in the mirror. We got the same problem. thing I don't know is, do you know what your problem is? I know 100% what my problem is. It's me. And when I started understanding that, started living that way, my life started getting better at work, at home, everywhere that I went. You can do the same, but not until you align your reality, your thoughts with your reality, your thoughts with the truth. That whatever's wrong in your world, you're the root cause of it. And once you figure that out, there's a whole lot of other stuff you got to do, potentially, to understand that and to deal with that effectively. But until you realize you're the root cause of your circumstances, good or bad, you ain't going to do nothing about that root cause. Let's talk about intention some more. I'm sure you already know first impressions are extremely important. When it comes to character, our intention is our first impression. When I meet you, your intention relative to me is your first impression. You know what they say, the first impression is the most important. You don't get to make a first impression but once. What's your intention? When you get promoted and now you're talking to your team for that first time that you're interacting with them, even if you've known them for years, as soon as you get that position and title, what's your first impression that you make on your team with that title strapped to you? They're going to be looking. You got to rebuild that relationship on top of that title. The relationships you had before, they don't automatically carry over when you get a position of authority over those folks. What we do and say builds trust or creates distrust. Talking about our intention. This is important because trust is the foundation of influence. But what is the foundation of trust? It's what I'm talking to you about today. It's the why behind everything we do and say, everything you do and say. That's what the foundation of trust is. Get it right, you got a foundation upon which you can build trust. Get it wrong, there is no foundation. You won't ever be able to build trust. You already know this when you look out the window. You can see it easily in your relationships with other people. Intent is the foundation of trust. But it's also what can eliminate that foundation. What is your intent? So from time to time in this episode, maybe next episode, I'm going to ask you some thought-provoking questions to help you stop and think. In my book, Defining Influence, I've got a lot of these stop and think sections within the book. And when I come across them as I'm teaching these lessons, I'm teaching more than what's in the book, but I'm kind of using the book as a guideline to share these episodes that I'm focused on now. Not really calling it a series because at any moment I might stop and do something else that ain't got nothing to do with this book. So I don't really want to make it a series. Again, it's a longer book. So I'm just taking some content, provoking thought within myself, and sharing some content from the book and adding quite a bit to it as I go. So I may cover just a page or two, but I may turn it into a 30-minute podcast. But you can read those couple of pages. If you were reading them, it might only take you 3-4 minutes, something like that. But I'm turning it into a 30-minute episode, talking a little bit deeper about it. But these stop and think questions, after you thought about the question from your own perspective, turn it around and ask from someone else's perspective, assuming you're on the other side of the question. That's how you get the most out of these questions. And I'll help you do it whenever I introduce one of those here. And I'll be doing it in a minute. But don't forget the importance your thoughts have on the choices you make. So you can increase your influence with others, which will increase your effectiveness. That's what every podcast I do, every book I write, every video I make is to help the audience, the listener, or the person watching or reading understand that you can influence your influence with others, which will increase your effectiveness. And my goal is to help you learn all the different ways, discover many of the principles, talk about some practices that are going to help you do that. So the questions I ask, these stop and think questions, they'll help you determine if your influence with others is increasing or decreasing based on the principles being discussed within the question. And the questions are presented from your frame of reference, looking outward at others, because when it happens to you, you not only see what is happening, but you also feel what is happening. So when you try to look at a situation from another's perspective, you usually continue to see and feel from your own perspective, unless you're extremely good at empathizing, which is seeing and feeling how others see and feel. That's what you got to learn how to do. So you can figure out, is what I'm doing increasing my influence or decreasing my influence? And you may find it difficult to truly see things from another's perspective if you haven't truly been doing it as a habit in your life. But you can and should learn this valuable connecting skill. That's what it does. When you learn to see from another's perspective, it changes how you do what you do. It changes what you say and how you say it, when you say it. But a lot of people, they got a lot of narcissistic tendencies. They focused on themselves. They ain't worried about what somebody else is seeing or thinking or hearing or feeling. But high impact leaders are. So let's give it a try as we start discussing intent as the foundation of trust. And I've already been discussing it a good bit, but I'm going to go into it farther. So here's one of those stop and think questions. When someone builds trust with you, does their influence increase or decrease? It's pretty easy. It's obvious when you slow down and think about it. When someone builds trust with me, there is no doubt their influence increases with me. If I trust someone more, that's what building trust does. It causes others to trust you more. That's why we call it building trust. So if I'm building trust, if someone's building trust with me, they're also increasing their influence with me. Someone who I trust a lot, they're going to have a lot of influence with me. Someone I don't trust at all or very little, they're not going to have any or very little influence with me. It all comes down to trust. And see, this is the example of what I was saying a minute ago. I'm asking you to look out the window. When someone builds trust with you, does their influence increase or decrease with you? So now we looking out the window at somebody doing it to us. Or maybe I should say looking in the mirror. How do I feel? But you're going to get the most value out of this when you can put yourself in someone else's shoes. And now let's look out the window. When I do this to others, what's happening? And that's what I'm talking about when I say these stop and think questions. You need to see it from your frame of reference, but to truly understand the power that you can gain from understanding, empathizing with others, you got to look and see it from the other side. So when someone builds trust with me, their influence increases, obviously. So what happens, look in the other direction, what happens when I build trust with someone else? Same thing. My influence increases. So if I want to build influence, which will make my life better, I have less frustration, the more influence I have, I've got to know every action, every behavior, everything I say, everything I do, how I say it. I got to try. And it takes a lot of effort in the beginning when you're not used to doing this. But I got to do it with the intention of getting better at doing it, with the intent of building trust. And it gets tricky. And I'm going to talk about it later in this episode, and in the next few episodes, I'm going to get deeper and deeper into this trust talk, because it's not that simple. It's simple to understand it, It ain't so simple to do it. But everyone says when someone builds trust with us, their influence increases. It's a self-evident truth. The more we trust someone, the more influence they have with us. It's a natural law. It's a principle. Greater trust means greater influence. And as I said, when we build trust with others, our influence increases with them. It works both ways. Now let's look at the flip side of that. Another stop and think question. When someone creates distrust with you, does their influence increase or decrease? Everyone says the same thing. Everyone knows it already. Influence decreases. It's another self-evident truth. The less we trust someone, the less influence they have with us. The more others distrust us, the less influence we will have with them. So think about it. Reverse that question. When you create distrust with someone else, does your influence increase or decrease? See how that works? I got to think about what happens when someone creates distrust with me. It's obvious. Their influence decreases. Okay, what happens when I create distrust with someone else? Should be obvious. If I slow down and think about it, it's the same principle at play, just in a different direction. Then I'm creating distrust with them. As self-evident truths, everyone always knows the answer to both of the previous questions that I was asking you. That's what it means, self-evident. The truth is right there. It's plain, it's obvious. But most of us are not asking ourselves these questions. We're not thinking about it that deeply. And out of all my books, Defining Influence really is the book I wish everyone would read that I've written. Most people won't because it's a bigger book. And it doesn't say blue collar leadership on the title. People really like the blue collar leadership books. One reason they're small, 30 chapters, 3 pages each. So it's 90 pages. This book's about 3 times as thick. But this book has the really, really good in-depth stuff that helps you make everything in all my other books easier to implement. So the principles of trust are directly related to establishing influence. So be sure you internalize that principle right there before you move on with this podcast. You might want to hit pause. You might want to hit rewind. But the principles of trust are directly related to establishing influence. That's what you got to know. That's why your key thought, I want to increase my influence. You got to be thinking that. You got to know if I increase my influence, my life's going to be better. So once I understand that, I got to know the key to doing that, the principle behind increasing my influence is to increase trust, to build trust, avoid creating distrust. And again, I'm going to share more detail on trust in this episode and then continuing on into the next several episodes, most likely. But it'll help you now if you have this basic understanding of the impact of trust and distrust, the impact they have on your influence. More trust, more influence. Less trust, less influence. That's simple. So every single podcast you ever hear me talk about, or any of my books you read, whether I'm saying it or not, you got to be thinking it. I got to be doing what's going to create the most trust. 360 degrees of trust wherever I go. That's what I'm trying to do. Doesn't mean I'm going to get it right all the time, but I got to be aware of it. That's got to be my intent. But again, the only intent that matters is the intent that everyone else feels. What do they feel like your intent is? You can want it to be something all day, but if other people don't feel like it is that, in their world, it's not that. Why is there so much distrust in our lives, in our families, in our workplace, in our government, in general, all over the world? It comes down to why we do what we do and why others do what they do. It's about values. The intent behind what we do transfers to others. They can see it. They can feel it. We cannot hide our intent. Tell you something more important than that. We also shouldn't need to hide our intent. That's where a whole lot of people go wrong right there. They try to pretend. Bosses, they try to pretend they care about us, but they don't. But they try to pretend they do. That's why sometimes in a workplace, they may have a cookout or something for the employees. You'd think that's a positive thing. But if the employees feel like the whole reason behind it is to manipulate the people, then that positive thing is a negative thing. The people just see it as another way to manipulate us, to get over on us. I've been in those situations and I've heard the conversations. I've heard the people, when a company does something good, they might cook a steak dinner or they might bring out an ice cream truck or something in the middle of the summer and serve everybody ice cream. But it don't feel authentic, like they actually care. You know why? Because they didn't care. We all knew they didn't care. They were just checking a box. If they actually cared, they wouldn't even have to have done that. But if they'd done it, it would have been received in the right way by all of us. We could tell every day how they led us, how they interacted with us, how they talked to us, when they didn't talk to us. They couldn't hide who they were. We felt it all the time. But everything we do and say has the potential to influence others. But why do we actually do what we do and say what we say? The truth. Not what we want everybody to think, the truth. Why we influence others, our intent, comes down to two complicated reasons that seem rather simple at first: manipulation and motivation. And there's a very fine but important line between these two words, between manipulation and motivation. I've heard a lot of people say, what I'm teaching sounds a lot like manipulation. If I'm trying to teach it to somebody who has zero interest in it and don't want to know nothing about it, that would be manipulation, but I don't do that. My goal is motivation. So I want to talk to people who do care about what I'm talking about, who do want to become a better person, who do want to develop a higher degree of character, who do want to model and live the kind of principles I'm talking about and teaching about. But is it manipulation or motivation? A lot of times when we go into a company, I can tell there's people in the room feel like they're being manipulated. And guess what? In their world, they are. They get to decide. There could be somebody sitting right beside them who feels motivated. And it's the truth. In their world, they are motivated. What's the difference? The person who feels manipulated does not want to be there, and the boss told them to be there. Made them come to the session. They ain't interested. They probably don't have a good relationship with the boss. They just see me as an extension of the boss trying to manipulate them. The one who feels motivated, they value what I'm talking about. They want to be there. They probably have a great relationship with the boss who brought us in. So they feel motivated. See how this stuff starts to work? So I'm going to wrap it up today. Come back to you next week. And we're going to talk some more about motivation and manipulation. Take it down a little bit deeper. So these episodes are kind of building upon themselves. So as I sign off today, I want you to be thinking about that. What is your intent? Your real intent when you're interacting with people? Is it to serve them as a high-impact leader, as a high-impact individual would do? Or is it to be served by them? That's what low-impact leaders, low-impact people, that's what they want from everyone else. They want to be served by everyone else instead of to serve everyone else. All right. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Talk to you next time.
Make it happen or someone else will. It might as well be you. Are you serious about taking your career and your life to the next level and beyond? Check out Mack Story's Blue Collar Leadership series books and others, now available on audio, along with paperback and ebooks at Amazon and Audible. Please visit bluecollarleadership.com to learn about Mack's books, programs, special offers, and more. Thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast.